Patrick Ossis here. So for this week's episode of Burned, I decided to go on WikiLeaks and search the word burn pits and just see what I was able to pull up based on documents that have been leaked to them. I was specifically looking for anything to do with the threats, for the smoke represented to the personnel that were stationed there or the local Iraqis. What I found was actually pretty surprising. I found 11 instances of accidents, for example, people burning themselves on accident while they were working at the burn pits. I found 14 cases of munitions being found in the burn pit. In other words, somebody threw them in and they hadn't cooked off yet in the fire, so they were able to diffuse them before they could go off. 12 cases of burn pit intrusions. That means people breaking into the perimeter using the burn pit as cover, kind of, because the smoke would obscure them from any patrols that would be around. And if it was at nighttime, the fire from the burn pits makes kind of a whiteout with night vision, so you can't really see anything. I found 13 cases of mortars hitting the burn pits directly. I found one case of a C-17 dumping its flares because its heat-seeking missile systems thought the burn pit heat was from a missile, so it dumped its flares, which could have caused a lot of damage to the base. And I found 3 instances of EOD destroying bombs in the burn pits. So I want to go over kind of the specifics of what I found. As far as what I found when it comes to accidents, a couple examples here. One soldier had smoke inhalation from the burn pit, from breathing in the smoke, obviously. Another Marine was injured while burning sensitive material when gunpowder was introduced into the burn pit. The Marine had second-degree burns to his mouth, neck, and hands. Another example, a sailor was pouring fuel into a burn pit when the fire traveled up the stream into the can he was holding. The sailor received second-degree burns to his face and his upper body. Another example, a 5-ton rolled into the burn pit at FOB Spiker. The 2 crew that were in the 5-ton were unhurt, but 1 radio, the 5-ton, and 2 M16s were destroyed. And final example, while burning trash in the burn pit, a soldier fell in and burned himself, and that happened at FOB Herrera. As far as what I found in regards to mortar attacks, here's a couple examples. 2 mortars hit the burn pit in Ramadi, and then there's another example of the same thing. This time only 1 mortar hit the burn pit in Ramadi. FOB Normandy took 2 mortar hits in the burn pit. And a final example, 1 mortar round impacted in the Balad burn pit. For examples of perimeter intrusion, I have a couple here. First one is perimeter breach discovered. 5 locals were detained inside the wire heading for the burn pit. Possibly they were garbage scavengers. Next example, 8 Iraqis breached the perimeter at LSA Adder at the burn pit. 2 locals breached perimeter at the burn pit. They used the smoke to hide. That goes along with what I was saying, where they kind of use it for cover, which are a couple instances happened to me at Balad, where we saw them breaking in that way. 10 locals breached the perimeter at Camp Tagadum. Probably said that wrong. They refused to leave until tracers were fired in front of them. Next example, 4 locals with a donkey attempted to breach the perimeter at the burn pit, but were driven off with warning shots. Another, in the final incident, a 2x2 foot perimeter breach was discovered at the burn pit. Here's an interesting example. This is a C-17 that I was referring to. The heat from the Bagram burn pit triggered the missile warning system on a C-17. The C-17 auto-deployed 8 flares thinking the burn pit was a missile. Obviously those flares, I don't know if you've ever seen those before, but they burn extremely hot, and if they would have been deployed all over the base like a tent city or something like that, that could have been very bad, and it could have led to some deaths and severe injuries, that's for sure. Now, as far as what I found to be probably the most dangerous thing I discovered on WikiLeaks, is the fact that a lot of bombs or grenades, munitions of different kinds are constantly being found in the burn pit. Here's some examples of that. 2 soldiers were burning mail when something in the burn pit exploded, wounding both soldiers. While burning items in the burn pit, one mortar and one artillery shell were discovered in the burn pit. Next example, an aerosol can exploded in the burn pit, injuring one soldier. Another example, 2 Russian grenades were found in a small bag in the burn pit. And the final example, 1 grenade was found in the burn pit at Camp Bastion. So I kind of wanted to sum up what my thoughts are on all this, what information I found there, and what information I can glean, or what what we can do with this information going forward. Some of the things that I discovered are, obviously there's a lot of accidents there, but I mean, to be quite honest, there's always accidents with everything in the military. I mean, I think that one of the first casualties in the war on terror was actually not in a combat. It was an accident somewhere in the Persian Gulf. I can't remember exactly where a pallet fell on somebody, I believe. I remember hearing that when I was deployed, that was the first casualty. So casualties in relation to doing, I mean, military service is dangerous. I understand that, I accept that. So I don't think the fact that some people were injured at the burn pits would be enough justification to shut down or stop the use. However, it is a concern. I mean, you are losing personnel because they are getting injured in these things. You remember the one example with the 5-ton going in. That was extremely dangerous. A couple weapons were burned, lost, a radio, and the 5-ton itself. So there is a cost to these to be looked at with these burn pits, as far as it goes with destruction of equipment and injuring personnel, just off normal operations. Secondly, burn pits are mortar magnets. I knew that when I was stationed there. It was pretty obvious. They were constantly being mortared there. It was always kind of my opinion that they used it as a way to kind of gauge where they were hitting at and adjust based off hitting the burn pit, but I can't confirm that. It was just always kind of a theory of mine, because I'd always hear them hitting the burn pit and then they'd adjust, and next thing I know, it'd be coming in on the search area where I worked at. Obviously, the burn pits are popular areas to break into for either terrorists or just locals there to scavenge, hunt, or do whatever they were trying to do. We caught numerous examples of this when I was stationed there in 2006, 2007, of folks breaking in there, and it was a big concern that was a huge area of kind of a blind spot for us, because, as I already mentioned, it was hard to see them through the smoke. And then on top of that, at night, our night vision basically didn't work because of the glow. So there's a huge risk of base intrusion at these burn pits. That's pretty obvious. The most important information that I take away from this is the fact that munitions keep getting found in there. And I suspect, and I can't prove this, but I suspect terrorists throw a lot of these munitions in there, waiting for them to cook off to injure the personnel that are in there. I mean, these burn pits are almost always exclusively located right on the perimeter, so it's really not that hard for somebody to toss something in there, and as people are working, boom, a grenade goes off. I mean, I already showed you that one example where that did happen. And then you have another example of an aerosol can exploding. Now, some of these munitions that were found in there could have been from GIs that were, for whatever reason, lazy or whatever, and somehow they were introduced into the burn pit. Or it could have been deliberate terrorist acts where they're throwing things in there hoping it'll cook off. The one where it was the 2 Russian grenades, I find that hard to believe that came from American soldiers. So more than likely that was an attempt to injure the personnel that worked there. In conclusion, obviously, we already know very well that the burn pits are extremely dangerous. We already know by breathing in that poisonous junk that comes out of there, it's killing people, and people are still dying to this day, and unfortunately our government is yet to do anything about it. As the clock ticks away and we lose more and more veterans to this god-awful Agent Orange 2.0, our government still does nothing and sits on its hands. I recently looked on the burn pit bill just to see what the odds are, the one that's in the Senate that Senator Tillis and a few others are sponsoring. I looked at it and just checked what the odds are. They display on the website there what the odds are of this bill being passed. It showed, I think, 1% chance of it passing. So I'm still questioning how serious the government is about actually helping us. But on top of getting help for those of us that were poisoned by the burn pit, we need to prevent this from ever being used again, because obviously it's too dangerous. On top of the fact that there's a poisoning effect due to the chemicals and the things that are burned, there's other issues to look at, as I showed with these examples. You have intrusions, you have weapons being, or munitions being found in the burn pits, you have regular accidents. It's obviously a bad practice. that shouldn't be used at all. The military should not be using open burn pits. Simple as that. Everything I told you here, or every example I showed you, is factual from their own records. So this isn't something I'm just making up. There are obviously some dangerous concerns with the burn pit aside from the smoke. I knew that when I was stationed there. So there's other issues to be concerned. And what I'd like to do is kind of spread this word out there. So, you know, these are additional resources that we can use to battle against the government as far as this burn pit issue is concerned. There's a lot of danger out of these, not just where the smoke is concerned. And the government needs to take this seriously and not do this. I mean, how horrible would it be if one of my daughters joins the military and they get poisoned by the same thing that poisoned me? That I just don't know if I could live with that. That would hurt me too much. I mean, we can't have that. So please share this video. Let's get the word out there that there's a lot of other dangers with these burn pits aside from the obvious, breathing in the poison. And also, I'd like to get the word out as far as what I'm looking at right now as the one bill that we have in the Senate right now, having only a 1% chance of passing. I'm sorry, that's just, that doesn't cut it for me. That doesn't work. How many years have we been waiting for some kind of legislation? You know, over a decade now, and now we're just going to wait longer. I mean, it almost kind of looks, you know, at times, it's kind of like these bills are just put in as discussion points, you know, oh, maybe this time we'll talk about it, but usually it dies in session without even being discussed, you know, and this has got to stop. It's getting ridiculous. I want to thank all of you for your support, and I'll keep doing these videos, and I'll come out with a new one next week. Thank you all for all your support.
Please subscribe to our channel, PH News. Our motto is fact-based media.